Welcome back to the Matt and Eric Talk Twins podcast. If you blinked and missed it, you wouldn't be alone. We're already almost halfway through the MLB season so far. Feels just as weird to me as I'm sure it does to you, but that gives us as good of a time as any this week to take a bit of a look back, dish out some report cards, see how the team's been doing, where we're headed. As usual, we'll have a few injury updates as well, talk a little shop probably about the trade deadline, but we are largely at the midpoint of the season and ready to talk about it. So, Matt, how are you feeling this week? And maybe how are you feeling about our season as a whole so far?
Feeling good this week. 5-1 in the last two series. Went to Texas and swept them. Went out to Arizona, took 2 out of 3. Now, tough assignment ahead coming home to face the Dodgers, but the Twins team is still in it. They're still, only 3.5 back in the Central. We'll get into it more, but the White Sox and Guardians certainly aren't unfallible and have significant injuries they're battling through. So I don't know, feeling like there's a chance the Twins could sneak into a playoff spot, which is unexpected for this season.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the better outcomes we could be looking at this late into the season. I mean, when we were at this point at the start of the season, it kind of came with that asterisk of, yeah, wait until the real Twins show their heads around here. But maybe this is just the real Twins. Maybe some of the faith that they had internally wasn't so misfounded, and maybe some of the hate nationally was a little over the top with some of the absolute star players that still existed on this team. And to their credit, it once again wasn't a pair of bad teams that they just dragged over in Texas and Arizona. The Rangers were above 500 before we swept them, at least, and Arizona is, I believe, still above 500 after this series. So they're once again not only getting it done, but getting it done against some real opponents.
Yeah, 100%. And even teams, the Twins are now in this group, but even those teams who are in the back end of a wild card chase, like they can have bad weeks. We've seen really good teams have bad weeks, bad series. And so any team can look bad over a 3-game stretch, but definitely encouraging to see the Twins win a couple series in a row. They've won, I think, 2 out of their 3 before these two. And so, they're really off and rolling. They've made up a lot of ground in the standings, and it is exciting. I will say some of the things that we brought up as concerns at the beginning of the season were absolutely founded and have not gotten much better. As of this recording, Twins relievers, dead last in baseball in ERA, dead last in baseball in WHIP, third to last in walks per 9, second to last in hits per 9. And the Twins defense, dead last in defensive runs saved, 25th in outs above average. So defense and relief pitching, still atrocious.
I think it's hilarious that Justin Lawrence is here for less than 2 weeks and was the first guy back out of the bullpen. I mean, we've seen a lot of really, really bad arms already come through this bullpen and get longer cups of tea than Justin Lawrence did. So, in a weird way, like, hats off to him for being so impressively bad that he did what no other reliever could do in what will shape up to be probably the worst bullpen in baseball this year. And he saw himself right in and right back out.
Yeah, he was pretty bad. I think we were both kind of excited for Justin Lawrence when the Twins picked him up. And he was pretty awful. He threw 6 innings for the Twins. In those 6 innings, he gave up 12 runs, and he allowed 2 hit by pitches, 2 wild pitches, 9 walks, and 4 home runs in 6 innings. So he was pretty awful.
Genuinely, the most surprising part about that to me is only 2 wild pitches. I was hoping you would have that number because to me it felt like he was averaging 2 an inning.
Yeah, we didn't quite get to Trevor Richards territory, but we got close. I think Justin Lawrence probably sticks around in the organization. I doubt that anyone's going to pick up, the $1.2 million contract he's attached to. He doesn't have enough service time to opt out of his deal and still keep the guaranteed money. So I think most likely he just ends up down in AAA as some sort of depth. But at this point, that's a sunk cost of, I mean, it's not a whole lot of money, but $1.2 million is like 1% of the Twins' payroll. So kind of a questionable use of resources.
I mean, if you're Justin Lawrence, I really don't know if there's a better place to be right now than AAA if you're not going to be in the major, AAA St. Paul if you're not going to be in the major leagues, just because this bullpen really doesn't get a whole lot better just by dropping him. It also is still filled with a lot of old arms and a lot of guys who've been very injury prone. We're seeing that already. I mean, he was really only here because Kendry Rojas was hurt, and that led to, I mean, a whole bunch of chain of moves. But ultimately, the fallout was that we needed a reliever. I imagine we're going to be needing one again very soon. I don't know. This would actually be really fun to track. I don't know what the longest stretch the Twins have gone through this season is without having some sort of reliever transaction, even if it is as minor as, you know, optioning a guy down because somebody got healthy or picking a guy like Justin Lawrence up off of waivers. We knew this bullpen was going to be bad. I'm still amazed at the speed and consistency with which these bullpen moves keep coming in.
Yeah, I will say I have the current Twins bullpen pulled up, and it has gotten a lot younger and more team controlled over the years. So currently, the only impending free agent out in the pen is Taylor Rogers. And then the next longest tenured player, the second highest service time guy, is Anthony Bonda, who the Twins control for next year as well. And he's looked really good. He hasn't allowed a run in almost a month. He's been super solid. And then after that, we don't have a single guy in the bullpen who has reached even 1 year of service time. And so, we have Andrews Gomez, Andrew Morris, Travis Adams, Eric Orzi, Cody Lawyerson, Kendry Rojas. There's a lot of younger arms in there, a lot of guys who you could see, get a real shot at being a long-term middle relief option. A lot of guys who are controlled for as long as anyone's going to really want their control. So it's starting to look like, there might be some pieces out there that could be good in the next Twins bullpen. Andrews Gomez has definitely been promising. Andrew Morris, as I noted, Anthony Bonda's really turned a corner. And then Orzi and Rogers have been kind of solid, if unspectacular, middle relief options. But overall, I think the bullpen's doing a lot better recently, at least.
Yeah, I'm going to go so far and be so bold as to say something good about this bullpen because, as bad as it is, it could still be a lot worse. We do got to give credit to Jeremy Zoll for pushing as many buttons as he is and trying out different arms because there is a world where he could have just said, well, we're going to value development and service time for our younger arms. And they very closely did go into the start of the season with Andrew Chafin on the roster, with Liam Hendricks on the roster. There's been a whole litany of guys, as I mentioned, that got tryouts in the bullpen and have been moved on from just as fast. Even if we haven't found as many answers as we were hoping for, it's been really refreshing to see them trying so hard with so many different arms to get it right because it is at least visible to the everyday fan that they are aware of their issues and trying to fix them.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just what, okay, bear with me here. That's what good bad teams do. That's what well-run bad teams do, right? Like bullpen options are kind of fungible. There's a ton of guys out there in any given year, and there's a bunch of guys who throw hard and are interesting that are maybe a tweak or two away. And so good front offices, good coaching staffs take shots on a bunch of these guys, hope a couple pan out, and now you've really created some value out of nothing. And so we're seeing the Twins try to do that. Andres Gomez has been a success story in that mold. And we see teams like the Rays do this constantly. And so, I think it's too early to say whether the Twins have been real successful in it, at least for this year. But you go back the last few years, they've definitely found scrap heap guys that have been productive. And hopefully we're one step closer to rebuilding that bullpen.
One guy I do want to shine a bit of a closer light on before we get off of this bullpen talk for the foreverth week in a row is Mike Paredes, who went out there again today And granted, he's bullpen ish because he's been starting for us. He's largely been the Mick Abel slash general fifth rotation spot fill in so far. But to his credit, he has yet to give up more than 3 runs in any outing so far. He has stretched himself out. He threw 4 2/3 against Texas on Monday in a game we won. He threw 5 innings flat today and gave us 2 run ball through those 5 innings, which you have to be ecstatic about if you're the Twins and you're Jeremy Zola and you're Derek Shelton, because this was the type of guy that we had talked about when the first TBD start was put up on the schedule, as we have truly no idea. Like, this could be a guy summoned from the depths of double A, even, that we've never heard of in our life, that is pitching just because somebody physically has to be present and pitch. And Paredes has not only been reliable, but he's been okay. He's been serviceable. So, is there a world where Mike Paredes has pitched himself onto the roster for the foreseeable future?
No. He has thrown 20 innings and has 9 walks to 11 strikeouts. He has been a batted ball luck merchant.
Do we think that would change if we push him to the bullpen in a short to like middle term relief role?
Well, I mean, if you're not missing bats to that extent as a starter, I don't think he's going to go to the bullpen and immediately find, strikeout per inning. Even like in the minors, he's had, man, in a full season last year, or actually this year, is the only year of his minor league career where he's averaged even a strikeout per inning. And that's really held up by him striking out a ton of guys in double A. And that really evened out in triple A this year. For what it's worth, Fangraph's main projection systems have him as like a 16 to 19% strikeout rate guy as a starter. So even if he has a big tick up and he gains 3 or 4 percentage points of strikeout rate moving to the bullpen, he would still be a well below average strikeout arm. So I do not have faith in that.
He would, however, be on par and perfectly level with pretty much every other arm in the Twins bullpen in terms of bat missing ability. So,
The Twins actually do miss some bats in the bullpen. Like I've referenced how bad their overall numbers were, but like they're 21st in baseball in K per nine. They do have some guys who miss a lot of bats. Morris's strikeout rate's ticked up a lot. Gomez has almost a 30% strikeout rate. Anthony Bonda's strikeouts have ticked up. Cody Lawyerson strikes a lot of guys out. Kendry Rojas hasn't so far, but has that kind of stuff. Eric Orzi's even missing some bats. It's really just like Travis Adams and Taylor Rogers who don't have big bat missing ability.
since we're talking about guys with swing and miss stuff in our bullpen, there is one guy I want to circle back to. I know I said that Mike Paredes was my last piece on the bullpen. I know you guys hear a lot about the bullpen from us every week. I swear this is my actual last point. I heard an interesting bit on the broadcast last night, which is in itself noteworthy because you had to have been a real trooper to be watching this blowout by the eighth and ninth inning last night. But they were talking about Derek Shelton addressing the media and being very firm that Yoendrys Gomez is not his closer. That Yoendrys Gomez is a late inning leverage arm and certainly has earned the responsibilities of some of the toughest innings of the game, but he wanted to be very adamant that he doesn't view Yoendrys Gomez just as a closer. And yet, Andres Gomez pitched on Monday of last week and then didn't pitch till Friday again, largely because we had a series of really funky games where the Twins won 12-2 and 9-3 against the Rangers, got trounced pretty badly 9-5 by the Diamondbacks on Friday, and then obviously had the big turnaround game where they won 16-8 last night, and Andres Gomez finally got back into the game. Do you really buy Shelton's comments? Because to me, as much as he doesn't want to say Yoendrys Gomez is the closer, I think the only world where anybody else besides him picks up saves going forward is a situation like today, where the heart of the order was really in the eighth, and that was when he was the most needed.
Yeah, but that's all that Shelton's saying, right? Is that we're gonna play matchups in the back end of the bullpen. Gomez might be the highest leverage guy, but they're not locking him into a closer role. He's just gonna throw big innings, right? Like he's gonna throw the most important parts of games, especially with righties up at the plate. And I think that his usage this week tracks with that. The Twins didn't throw him in the blowout games; they gave him some rest, and then today when they needed him, they threw him in the eighth inning against the heart of the order and let Bonda get the save opportunity. Like, I think sometimes there's some interchangeability between closer and best reliever, and I definitely think he's our best reliever, but they're not using him in a true closer role, meaning that they just throw him in the ninth when they have a 3 run or less lead.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's more just an issue I had with the messaging because realistically, I think there's very few, if any, teams left in the league that have a traditional closer that lines up in that situation where you're getting the ninth inning of a 3 or less run game no matter what. I guess I would have just liked to have seen Shelton approach it differently because, to me, there's two very different messages and tones. And this guy's not our closer. He's not the de facto it guy. That's not the role we have in mind for him versus, hey, we are adapting like every other MLB team. He's not maybe going to close every game, but he's certainly our highest leverage arm at this point. He's a guy we have a lot of trust in, and I think you can expect to see him throwing some of our biggest innings consistently. As to me, it just sounded a little weird the way that he pitched it and the way that I think kind of everybody went about the whole ordeal.
Yeah, but like that's just semantics and wording in one little encounter. Like if you look at Shelty's actions, he is acting like Andres Gomez is his most prized bullpen option, and I think that's a fair stance to have. And yeah, maybe the messaging was a little bit clunky going out to the public, but like I think everyone in the clubhouse is probably on the same page where we don't have a true closer, but we have a couple guys that are really trusted in the back end, and we mix and match as needed. I mean, like the same could be said about Andrew Morris. Like he's thrown huge innings for the Twins recently. He's pretty clearly probably right up there with Gomez as like their most trusted or second most trusted guy. But he'll also occasionally throw, the sixth inning in a big spot or be the opener to start the game. And so I think they just really don't have a whole lot of like true roles in the bullpen.
While I still think the bullpen leaves a lot left to be desired if we want to talk midseason grades and if we want to look specifically at the high leverage portion of our bullpen, I think the Twins have somehow cobbled their way into like a soft B minus grade. I think I might give them even a B. Like this was a team where we sat there at the start of the season and openly questioned who the closer would be. I for a while was on the train of the Twins hitting the 5x5 with five different guys hitting at least five saves. That dream is certainly still not dead, but at the very least, if the bullpen itself as a whole unit has not improved, I think it's safe to say that our high leverage options are certainly better than what we're feeling at the start of the year, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're better than they were to start the year. True. But also, at the start of the year, they were truly atrocious. So, like, I don't think. I mean, we just talked about their overall statistics. They're dead last in ERA and WHIP, and like, yes, some of that can be drawn up to like a couple of clunky outings, especially by starters making long relief appearances. But like overall, this Twins team, by win probability added, their bullpen alone has been worth negative 1.29 wins, and so like that's not terrible. But when you consider like any given game, you have a 50% chance of winning, right? And so you could get to the eighth inning of a tied game. It's a 50% chance that you win. The Twins have the Twins bullpen has lost, three of those games as a whole. Like that 50% goes to zero three times over the course of 80 games. You could definitely say that's better than expected given how bad this bullpen as a whole has performed and how little confidence we had in them coming into the season. But also, that's still like almost a win and a half below even an average bullpen. That's still, games that they should have won that they didn't. Overall, you look at the bullpen, they're truly abysmal. It's getting better, but I think it's really hard to rate their overall performance as a group as anything other than an F. And maybe you say compared to expectations, it's like a C or C plus because like we thought they were going to be bad to begin with.
Yeah, it certainly depends on how you want to look at these grades. I have been largely considering it an over expectation type of thing because to me, the way I look at it is when we entered the season, I would say 100% of our bullpen was bad. There was not a single arm I trusted in there. The fact that we've gotten to point halfway through the season where you can look at least two, maybe even three or four guys and say, okay, this is an arm I can trust. This is a guy that I don't get upset seeing in the game. To me, I think you've got to count that as a win, especially when those wins are going to be so far and few between with a team like this. Where certainly, if we're looking at just performance relative to the league, there is no way to chop this up other than a fat, resounding F. But me personally, trying to find the good in this Twins team somewhere, even if they aren't always, it feels like. And I think this bullpen could be worse. So I'd be fine settling on like a very average C grade for them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like to use Derek Shelton's favorite phrase, hunt the good, right? Like look for reasons to be optimistic. If there's any reasons to be optimistic on this Twins team, it sure as heck isn't this bullpen. Uh if we want to talk about something that's, a little bit better, I think the lineup as a whole has outperformed expectations. Obviously, there's a few guys who are massive contributors to that, but coming into today's game, the Twins were at overall 9.7 wins above replacement from position players. They had a 104 WRC plus. That in addition to this team being, I believe, and I'll double check here, but I believe fifth in baseball in runs scored, which is correct. They only have a couple of standout hitters so far this year. Obviously, Byron Buxton has been phenomenal. He's on a 50 homer pace. Trevor Larnach and Cody Clemens have been great. And we're seeing signs of life from guys like Josh Bell and Victor Caratini and the resurgent Royce Lewis. But like overall, the pieces of this lineup don't scream top five lineup in baseball, but they've just scored at that level. Maybe that regresses to simply top 10 or top 12. But I think this is the only reason this Twins team is still in contention.
Yeah, it's interesting because you would think just at face value, looking at the team as a whole, that they should be regressing. But the longer you watch this offense, the more it feels sustainable. And I think to me, what it's really been about is the next man up mentality. Because as you mentioned, outside of Byron Buxton, guys have been good in stretches. Guys have even been great in stretches, but not many guys have been able to really maintain that success. I mean, at the start of the year, we were lamenting the struggles early of guys like Luke Keeschel, who we thought we could rely on as an integral part of the lineup. Josh Bell being in the absolute gutters, Victor Caratini not being able to hit the broadside of a barn. But at the same time, guys that we really didn't put a lot of stock into, like Trevor Larnach and Austin Martin, were lifting the offense early with offensive play that we, quite frankly, never would have expected even on their best days. And as those guys have kind of come back to earth, we've seen the exact opposite happen, where now Josh Bell has hit well enough that he's at least a positive WAR player. He's at a 708 OPS. He has point 0.1 WAR. Am I saying that I'm excited or happy with Josh Bell's performance? No, but he's no longer really hamstringing this offense. Obviously, Cody Clemens has come out of nowhere and gotten on a heater. I saw, I believe it was an Aaron Gleeman tweet that Luke Keeschel's batting over 300 in his last 40 games, something close to that. So it really has been one of those just wait and see years for the Twins. But the way they've gotten to this offensive production makes it feel sustainable to me.
Yeah, I don't know that it's sustainable, right? Like you look at their overall stats and you see They're 13th in batting average. Not the batting average matters a whole lot. It's just what I'm looking at here. They're 10th in on base percentage. They're 8th in OPS. They're 8th in home runs. They don't have the fastest lineup. I think they've gotten lucky in the sense that they've been really fortunate with runners in scoring position. They're hitting well above league average with runners on base. They're making the most of their opportunities, and every coach will say, that's just them, playing good baseball and picking each other up, and that's just what good teams do. But really, we know, batting average with runners in scoring position over a full season or multiple seasons will be roughly the batting average of your overall team. And so it's not really sustainable to say, well, they just hit well with runners on. That's not really how the statistics works. And the underlying numbers for this offense's performance don't necessarily support top 5 production in baseball. I will say, as you mentioned, Josh Bell has been really good over the last 6 weeks or so. Same with Luke Keeschel. Like, we do have some guys who are really turning it around and are starting to play a lot better. It's not just Byron Buxton hits a bunch of home runs and the Twins win. But I don't know. I think this is probably a top 10 lineup, and that's assuming we get Ryan Jeffers back. We get some contributions from some young guys. But right now, I think they're in a little bit over their head, but it's been encouraging any way you slice it.
I would say the reason that it feels sustainable to me, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said about batting with runners in scoring position not really being a maintainable average for them. I think it's just the way they've hit the crap out of the ball, something that I really did not see coming out of this team this year. Sure, they've been getting a lot of big hits in clutch situations, but they've also just been getting literal big hits. I mean, Brooks Lee already has 12 home runs this year. I don't know if I would have had Brooks Lee for 12 home runs on the entire season. Josh Bell is pushing 10. Byron Buxton is, I believe, still tied for the AL lead now with Yordan Alvarez. We already have 8 hitters on the year with at least 5 home runs. We have another 3 of them knocking on the door with 4. I get those aren't terribly impressive numbers, but anytime you have a lineup that can field 9 hitters that are going to reach at least a dozen dingers on the year, like, there's some serious pop to go around on this team. A lot of those guys that don't carry a lot of pop are finding ways to get it done without the home run ball. You want to talk about a guy who didn't really project with a lot of pop, Ryan Kreidler, who has been playing, yes, just well beyond his means, but also has 2 triples on the year and 3 doubles to go with his 4 home runs, because guys are just driving the ball more than I would have expected this year. So as much as they are hitting with runners in scoring position, they're also just creating a lot of run scoring environments.
Okay, but my counterpoint would be, if they're creating all of these run scoring environments, like they're hitting the ball really well, you would expect their overall numbers to be matching that, and they're just not. You look at up and down this Twins lineup, and there's not a whole lot of guys who stand out as well above average contributors, right? Like we talked about, Trevor Larnach and Byron Buxton and Cody Clemens being really the trio leading the way. But to use your Brooks Lee example, he has hit 12 home runs this year. He's shown some improvement from last year. He still only has a 102 WRC plus, so he's roughly league average, and that is with a weighted on base average 40 points over expected. It's also lower than either of his previous 2 seasons, where he was a 61 and 81 WRC plus hitter. And so, like, you can say, yes, this Twins team is hitting well and they're coming up with the big hits, and like Brooks Lee's a part of that. But also, even with good production from Brooks Lee, that good level of production, that improved production, is still roughly league average, and the underlying numbers don't support it. And so if we expect a guy like Brooks Lee or a guy like Cody Clemens to like come back down to earth a little bit, and on top of that, the offense as a whole has scored more runs than you'd expect for the overall production of its hitters. They're just sequenced in a way where we're scoring a lot more runs than expected. You expect not only the number of chances we convert to come down, but also the overall number of chances to be reduced because our hitters themselves start playing, a little bit worse or more to their actual skill level. I could see this offense falling off quite a bit just because they're quite over their head right now.
That's probably the safest bet for the direction of this Twins offense. It certainly takes a lot of stretching and massaging of the numbers to look at a team that is fifth in runs scored and think they're going to stay there the way the Twins have been. But I just keep going back to the idea of guys on the upswing, guys on the downswing. Maybe Brooks Lee doesn't continue to find gaps as consistently because you're right, like he's been hitting a lot more line drives. They aren't always particularly hard line drives. I mean, yesterday he had a big hit to start one of our big rallies. I want to say the one of the fifth inning, and it was just a smoked ground ball that was pulled so sharply that it got right by a diving first baseman. That's not a particularly great hit. That's not going to profile well in a lot of expected batting stats, but it's the type of hit that gets the job done for now. And maybe those hits do dry up in 2-3 weeks, but in 2-3 weeks, we are very legitimately looking at the return of Ryan Jeffers, which is a bat that we can rely on. Maybe in another 2 to 3 weeks, Cody Clemens is back to hitting 200, but also only slugging 350. But by that point, does it matter if we've been able to get Kalen Culpepper healthy and up, and that allows us to plug shortstop more permanently, which allows us to get Cody Clemens off the field more often if we want. I just see a lot of avenues for the Twins to be able to pick up this lineup as the guys who are currently carrying it start to fall.
Sure. I'm just saying the guys that we have currently carrying it, like it's legitimately, I mean, looking at season long totals, and this has changed over the course of the season. We talked about guys like Bell and Keishel playing a lot better recently, and that's helped this lineup immensely. But like looking at the season as a whole, the Twins only have, five semi-regular hitters who have a WRC plus above league average. So less than, well, about half of their lineup on a given day is guys who are at least average, which is not ideal. But Brooks Lee is at the bottom of that pack with a 102 WRC plus. Then Cody Clemens at 114, Trevor Larnach at 124, Jeffers at 163, and Buxton at 150. And so I guess you could say, if you get Ryan Jeffers back, that's another big bat in this lineup. But that's also assuming that Ryan Jeffers is, still a great hitter coming off of pretty major wrist surgery. I think we've seen data that suggests his power won't probably be the same this season coming off of that injury. It's hard to come off of a wrist injury for any hitter. And so I think that's a question mark. Kalen Culpepper hasn't even played in the big leagues. That's obviously going to be a question mark. You still have Roden and Jenkins and Erod, who we'd expect to see up at some point this year. Of those four minor league guys, right, that you expect will play a semi-significant role for the Twins at some point this season, if one or two of them turns out to be, a good player right away, that's a huge win. And I certainly wouldn't count on, all four of them to make an impact in the first season. And I think for this Twins team to have the kind of individual performance that makes them, as a top five run scoring offense makes sense, it would require, all of those prospects and Jeffers getting healthy, coming up, plugging big holes for this team, and all producing an above league average rate. And I just don't see that happening.
It's certainly a lot to be asking for from guys that we didn't really think we could ask for that level of production from, but it's also just been what's happening all year. If we want to bring this back to a midterms grade standpoint, because I'll agree, I think that this team is just as hard to forecast for the future now as it was at the start of the year. We now at least have half a season of data to go off of, and if I had to put a grade on this offense as a whole through the first half of the season, I'm going ahead and I'm going to give them a B plus. I want to push it into the A range, but you do make enough compelling arguments about how hard it is to believe in the sustainability of this offense that I can't get there because to me, a resounding A offense would be a team that is doing this with the underlying metrics to back it up and a vision and a forecast for the future that would tell us this is stable production. I do see this does really feel like kind of a glass floor where we're standing on it. We are up high at this moment, but you can see the cracks starting to form. Who knows if it's actually going to break and fall out from beneath us before the season is over, but just based on the baseball they've put down and put out on the field, I think this has got to be a great grade for the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, the offense, as I said earlier, is the only reason this Twins team is hanging around 500, the only reason they're playing at least somewhat compelling baseball. And so, yeah, I think it's clearly the shining bright spot of this Twins season. I do think Cody Clemens probably won't keep this up forever. On the other side, we're seeing big improvements from Bell, Lewis, Cartini, Keishel, all of those guys. I do still have some hope for the young guys coming up. That's another thing. We've talked about the bullpen and all the turnover there and all the young guys that are now in that pen. Yeah, we'll get to it with the rotation, but pretty much everywhere on the pitching side, the Twins have now turned to young options, guys that they see as big parts of their future, and we haven't seen that on the position player side. It's been largely driven by injury, but like at this point in the season, we absolutely would have expected at least one of and probably multiple of Alan Roden, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Walker Jenkins, and Kalen Culpepper to be in the big leagues. And largely because of injuries, we haven't seen that. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting stretch run because this is an offense that's already performing well. We have multiple top 100 prospects that we expect to plug in here, and we're gonna learn one way or another if those guys can perform in the big leagues. We're gonna learn a lot more about them as players, and hopefully they just join right into this already smooth running machine. This Twins offense goes to another level, and it'll be a great year. But I think that's just still a big question mark that we haven't had answered yet this season, where we've already started to get some of those answers elsewhere.
I want to hit you with an answer to a question that we did not have before the season because I really need some help making heads and tails out of this. There's one guy out of this offense that I specifically want to highlight just because I feel like we've been really, really quiet about him this year, and he has quietly been amazing for this Twins team so far. Ryan Kreidler has only 85 plate appearances on the season. He is not even a qualified hitter, but that is his already career high over any season. It is almost a third of the total plate appearances of his career, and it's been phenomenal. It's been transformative. It has been arguably what the second best bat in this offense behind Byron Buxton.
Okay, this is a part-time utility infielder here. Let's not say he's our second best hitter. Come on now.
Granted, yes, the usage has definitely been boosting some of these numbers. He's a guy, I mean, like Trevor Larnach and Austin Martin both immediately got pushed into everyday roles as soon as they started playing well in their platoon jobs and predictably started to cool off playing everyday roles because they were no longer protected by platoons. But if you go by the numbers, Ryan Kreidler has been one of at least probably the top four hitters for the Twins this season in pretty much any category you want to pick up.
Yeah, except for any that are volume based. Yeah, he's been good, right? Like it's hard it's hard to knock the guy, coming off of some truly atrocious offensive seasons. He does look a lot better at the plate, a lot more comfortable. He is getting to a lot more power. He's not striking out a whole lot. He's walking, right? Like everything that we could hope to see from Ryan Kreidler, we've seen, and it's been great. I just think overall, it's only 85 plate appearances, and it's 85 plate appearances as a part of 300 plate appearance sample that we have him in the big leagues. We just don't know all that much about him, and I'll start to have more faith if he can be, a league average player or a league average hitter over 200 plate appearances, 300 plate appearances, 400 plate appearances over the next couple of seasons. But I think right now it's just way too early to draw any sort of meaningful conclusion from what we've seen.
So my next question then would be, if we like what we've seen so far and we simply don't know if it's sustainable because we haven't seen enough. Like, what more can Ryan Kreidler do to get more opportunities to show that this is sustainable for a long term against not just a platoon aided pitching staff, but really against all sorts of pitchers? Because he has such a small window here, right? He's primarily our platoon shortstop with Tristan Gray, and we are hopefully very close to calling Kalen Culpepper up soon and filling that gap. He's moonlighted as a pseudo fourth outfielder. That could even vaporize very quickly with Alan Roden now healthy, Walker Jenkins on rehab assignments if he hasn't already rejoined AAA, and Emmanuel Rodriguez hopefully also back on the field within a month, 6 weeks, I think, is what we're looking at for him. So I would not be upset if this is just a flash in the pan and he loses his job to young guys that come up and we never really see or hear from him again. But I think he has earned and he deserves a larger look at the major league level, especially with how bad this team is overall still. So what more does he got to do to get there?
Well, I don't think there's anything more that he has to do, and we've seen him grow into a larger role, like especially with Tristan Gray's struggles at shortstop. I think we've started to see and will continue to see Kreidler playing there more frequently. And I also think, he's probably never going to be a starting player, right? I mean, he's a non prospect who's kind of bounced around. He's now almost 29 years old. He was a fourth round pick all the way back in 2019. Like at this point, he's got to just be hoping for a major league career. And I think at this point, we've also seen his ability to play quality defense at a bunch of different spots, pair that with a non horrendous bat. I think at this point, he's carved out enough value to where he will be in a bench role for some team somewhere, probably the Twins, for the next few seasons. And I think that that's a great outcome for him. And if he keeps hitting over the next couple of years, maybe at some point he can step in and be starter somewhere. If someone gets hurt and he can play regularly for a month or two, right? Like that's definitely within the realm of possibilities. But for a guy who comes up with the job of being kind of a backup utility man, not playing all that often, it takes a lot of playing well before you work yourself into being a really trusted option to where you're going to get 3, 4, 500 plate appearances in a season. And so, like I said, like he's been great. It's been awesome so far, and we can have hope for the future. But it's way too early to draw any sort of meaningful conclusions of what we've seen from him.
Well, I do still want to put a kibosh on this offensive talk for the first 79 games of the season. A grade out of you for what you've seen so far, Matt. These are midterms, performance reviews. Give us your final takes on the first 79 games of this offense.
Yeah, I think a B plus is totally fair. It's been a great offense so far from overall production. It's fair to question the underlying numbers, but should be getting healthier, should have reinforcements on the way. They can withstand a little bit of regression and still be, the 10 to 12 range run scoring offense in the league. That's a B plus offense to me.
Certainly no arguments here. And I think when you pair that with the last group we're going to talk about here, which I believe we will both end up agreeing was the best being saved for last, we start to paint the picture of how we've gotten here. Of course, we've got to finish this by talking about our starting pitching over the course of these first 79 games. You could go in any number of directions trying to review this pitching staff over the first 79 games because it has been such a journey with already even more guys getting starts than we could have ever imagined. So I'm going to let you pick your poison and choose where you want to start talking about this rotation, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's overall been pretty good. I think the rotation, more than anywhere else, just because of the defense they're pitching in front of, has worn the brunt of this being not a very good team around them. I think there's been a lot of examples of our starting pitchers having to get extra outs or not having plays made behind them that a normal team would. And so I think that that shows up really in their overall numbers, right? They're 19th in baseball in ERA. Then you look behind the scenes, they're above average in strikeout rate, walk rate, whip, all the things that you want to see from a pitching staff. So I think they've been a little bit more impressive than they get credit for. Obviously, that's headlined by Joe Ryan, looking like an all-star yet again. He's been phenomenal. He had that little injury scare with his elbow, but he's been great as a whole. The rest of the group, you know, Prelips had an encouraging start to his career, but there's been some ups and downs. I think he's starting to wear down a little bit. I think we'll see a phantom IL slash demotion coming for him when the rest of the rotation gets healthy again. Taj Bradley hasn't looked the same since coming off the injured list, but has really shown big flashes of being the guy the Twins traded for. Zebby Matthews has been, up and down. He looks pretty similar to how he has the last couple years. Still a little bit homer prone, but I think he's, at least a decent fifth starter type. And then you look at the guys on the injured list, of which there are many. But Mick Abel looked encouraging in the little bit we saw. Bailey Ober has been, again, up and down, but looks like a fourth starter. I'd say overall, this group has kind of performed in that, B minus area. They've been a little bit above average, not been great. But I think going forward, we could see that really jump up when they get healthy. And, assuming they don't trade Joe Ryan at the deadline, next year you look and you see Pablo Lopez rejoining this group, all these guys another year older, another year of development. I think it's pretty easy to get excited about this group.
Yeah, if you want to look at overall production compared to the league, once again, I think this grade goes down, but that really does not do justice to the rotation that the Twins have fielded this season. Because, look, me and Matt are really big fans, and we spent so much time talking about every possible permutation of this team this offseason. I can promise you, not once did the name Mike Paredes even cross either of our minds this offseason. The fact that he's already made what now, 5 appearances, I think speaks volumes to how absolutely injury decimated this rotation has been. And I get every team has injuries. Every team gets hurt. Every team has to deal with it. It sucks. I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to cry about it for the Twins because man, is ridiculous. McAbel got off to such a hot start, then has elbow inflammation. He's supposed to come back today, and then has a setback in his last rehab appearance on Friday. We don't know how long he's going to be gone now. David Festa was not supposed to be out this long. I mean, we knew he wasn't going to be healthy to start the season, but he continues to be the man of eternal setbacks. I don't even know if we can predict or plan on seeing him anymore this year. I mean, Taj Bradley spent time on the IL, Bailey Ober spent time on the IL. I believe the only starter, more or less, that has not spent time either on the injured list or in AAA for the Twins this season is Joe Ryan.
Yeah, he's definitely been the steadiest option in the rotation. He's been by far the best option. It does, for as good as this rotation has been at times this season, it would look a lot more uncertain if they do end up moving on from Joe Ryan at the deadline. I don't. I mean, we'll get into this more when we talk about the trade deadline. But if the Twins do end up trading Joe Ryan, yes, they have a ton of other options. They do have a lot of young starting pitchers that you hope can develop into Joe Ryan type starters. But he really has been the stabilizing force behind this rotation. And it would be a mess without him this season.
This season, the next, the year after, I could not possibly stunt enough for Joe Ryan. I know that's not even an uncommon take in Minnesota, but God, if we are going to have to start spending money with this new CBA, I see no better place to spend it than on Joe Ryan. I think that we have largely assumed that his days in Minnesota are numbered, and we've been numbering them all season because in any normal situation, I think the Twins do end up having to move on from him because he would get priced out of their spending range. But I don't really think this is worth speculating on with CBA talks still so undeveloped. At some point, this Twins payroll is going to go back up, and they could spend that on guys outside the organization to fill in the gaps. But to me, there's no point in doing that if you're not going to secure your foundation. And Joe Ryan is as close to a foundational pitcher that the Twins have had since, God, I know, Francis. No, I was gonna say Francisco Liriano, but that like is it crazy to say Johan Santana? Like, I think Joe Ryan's more foundational than Jose Barrios was, certainly more foundational than Francisco Liriano was. I can't think of anybody else who really had that potential career Twins ace type of ability that Joe Ryan does since Johan. Maybe Irvin Santana?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the closest would be like Sonny Gray, right? Like the Twins only had him for 2 years versus a full, you know, arbitration control window.
And even then,
But
he
I
was
think
what,
it's
30 when we got him?
right. But he finished runner up in the Cy Young the year during his walk year, and I think the conversation was similar, where it was like, yeah, they could spend this money elsewhere, but if you're not going to keep your own talent, like Sonny Gray's the guy that you want to keep. Yeah, runner up in the Cy Young, he's a very good pitcher. Why not just retain Sonny Gray? And I think we could have that same sort of conversation with Joe Ryan here. And I think for what it's worth, it is good business to not be paying pitchers into their 30s. It's usually doesn't work out super well to give expensive long-term deals to 30-plus-year-old starting pitchers. There's just not a great track record there. Um, but also, if you're this Twins team and you look at this rotation, you say Joe Ryan's the only one keeping it afloat, and also he's a fan favorite, and he's big developmental success story. He's had very minimal injury issues with the Twins. If there's a guy to make an exception for, it's probably him. But I just don't see the Twins doing that.
I do want to give a few props to Joe Ryan himself as well, just because this is a really difficult team to be a part of right now. It has been for the last year or so. We've given so many commendations to Buxton for being so adamant and steadfast about not wanting to waive his no trade clause, about wanting to be in Minnesota for his whole career, about all of this and that. I'm not saying that Joe Ryan is either A, on the level of Byron Buxton, or B, has had the career where he deserves this type of chatter. But at the same time, it would have been incredibly easy for Joe Ryan at the last deadline to say, hey, I want out. Would have been easy for him to say it this offseason. It would be easy for him to say it at this upcoming deadline. And much like Byron Buxton, he internally and externally, as far as we know, has not said a peep about wanting out of Minnesota. As far as I remember, he was even a little kind of disturbed and perturbed at the idea of getting traded at last year's deadline and seemed kind of upset about the idea of not being in Minnesota. So it's refreshing. I know we've talked about it before. We believe in Minnesota as a destination for guys to play in, but it's refreshing to see the players actually back that up with faith in this team and organization, especially at a time when they really don't have to.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we're getting away from the overall rotation talk, but I think it's worth noting too, just talking about the news and notes that have happened in the last week. If you didn't catch it, Dan Hayes of The Athletic reported on a conversation he had with Byron Buxton talking about trade deadline speculation. And Byron Buxton said, and I quote, I don't give an, well, you can fill in the blank, something. I'm gonna paraphrase now for this part, but he basically said that he, loves it in Minnesota. He doesn't want to be traded. He said, "I'm a Twin, and I'm not going to like want to trade." Essentially, and so that could change for sure if the Twins really tear it down to the studs, ship out Joe Ryan, ship out Ryan Jeffers, but I think for now, we can stop speculating on a Buxton trade because he's making it pretty clear that he wants to stay in Minnesota.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of trade talk coming. I think it's frustrating because a lot of this chatter does come from the national media, which pays a lot less focus, knows a lot less about the Twins than the actual local media who's reporting it correctly. But as you mentioned, we've gotten away from our main objective here right now. I'm going to swing us all the way back because I want to pick up on something you said earlier and hit you with a little. It's a number here. I don't know what it means. Could be nothing, could be something really kind of big. You mentioned how Connor Prelip started really well and has flamed out pretty spectacularly recently and looks like a guy who's in need of a phantom IL or kind of hard reset. I did see a stat. Granted, I saw this off of Twitter. You always find some weird stuff off of Twitter, but it is accurate. I double checked it. In his first 6 starts in the league, Connor Prelip threw to either Victor Caratini or Ryan Jeffers and held like a sub 3 ERA with the K per 9 over 10. Looked phenomenal. Looked like everything we thought he would be. In the 6 games since then, he has thrown exclusively to Austin Jackson and has just fallen apart and has looked just awful out there. I I would be surprised if the change in catcher is that impactful on a pitcher's performance, but he's a young pitcher. He is building himself up on the fly. He's learning how to throw in the big leagues on the fly. He's doing so many difficult things on the fly right now. Do you think that going from such steady veteran catcher leadership in Caratini and Jeffers to whatever we're going to credit Austin Jackson for could be affecting his game?
I don't think so. Um, I mean, yes, catchers do have an effect on the game, right? Also, I just want to point out Alex Jackson's been catching him, not the 2015 Tigers center fielder Austin Jackson. That would really be a spectacle.
I would actually love to see either of those, but yeah, that is a good point.
I think the bigger number here for us to focus on is that Connor Prelip is already at 71 and a third innings. Last year was the most innings he's ever thrown, probably in his life, and it was 82 and 2/3 innings over the course of a full season spread across Double A and Triple A. He's now getting very close to that mark. He's only 11 and a third innings away from his career high, and we're just in the middle of June. He's been asked to work deeper into games than ever before. He's throwing every fifth day instead of once a week. It's a lot of workload onto a young guy who hasn't been built up for all that long and has struggled with a lot of injuries. I think probably he's just very worn down. Yeah, I don't have his exact innings totals from like college and definitely not high school in front of me. But if memory serves, Connor Prelip threw only like 3 or 4 innings in college. He only threw 6 and 2/3 in his first year of pro ball, and then followed that up with only 23 and a third, and then you know 82 innings last year. There's a very real possibility that in this season alone, if Connor Prelip stays in the big leagues, he could hit the same number or more innings this year alone as he's thrown cumulatively between high school and entering this season. And so that's just an important thing to keep in the back of our mind when we see him start to struggle, especially coming off of long outings, and struggling more and more the longer he's in the big leagues. I think at some point he's just going to need a break and a reset because it's so much of a workload to take on for a guy who's never had to shoulder that.
Slightly to his credit, he did throw 82 and a thirds last season over two different leagues, double A and triple A last season for the Twins. But you are right. He is starting to push towards his single season career high. And we knew this was coming. We've been talking about it for a while about how Prelip is not going to be able to throw every fifth day for us over the rest of the season because he's not built up for that. But it puts us in such a pickle. It's a bit less of a pickle because he's been pitching so poorly recently. But it's so hard to look at this Twins team that's 3 games under 500, 3.5 games out of wild card spot, and say, hey, we're shutting this guy down, even though we are squarely still trying to contend, squarely trying to put our best team out there and win every game. We are ultimately putting this guy's future over the success of this year's team, and we are shutting him down. I'm not saying that is the wrong thing to do. I think with a guy like Prelip, you absolutely have to protect the pitcher over the team in this situation, but it's still a really tough bullet to bite for a team that already cannot afford to drop any more pitchers right now.
Yeah, I just went and looked up Connor Prelip. So coming into this season, dating back to high school, he has thrown 140 and 2/3 innings. This season, he's, as we already mentioned, at 71 and a third innings, and we're at roughly the halfway point in the year, which means that he is on pace to throw more innings this season alone than he has in the previous, what is that, 6 seasons combined, dating back to when he was an 18-year-old high schooler in Wisconsin. And almost all of those innings have come at the big league level, throwing once a week, 100 pitches. So that's a lot.
So I'm going to ask the question then. I don't know who the next guy coming off the injured list is. I really hope it's McAble. I'm hoping that this setback is nothing more than another bout of inflammation. We see him in 2 weeks. Let's say in 2 weeks we get our first healthy starting pitcher back. Who's the first guy out of this current rotation? Is it still Mike Paredes? Is there a world where it's not?
Uh, I don't know. I could see a world where they option Prelip. I think Prelip, even for his recent struggles, is still a much better pitcher than Mike Paredes. And I think the Mike Paredes early success has been a lot of smoke and mirrors and is not particularly sustainable. I will say the Twins did activate Kendry Rojas today. He's another guy who can kind of step into that Paredes role. And so I wouldn't be super surprised to see Paredes get optioned tomorrow, make room for another reliever. And then, potentially when Bailey Ober or Mick Abel gets healthy, that ends up being what bumps Prelip out of the rotation. But I could see the Twins going a number of different ways. And honestly, a big part of it is going to be just talking to Prelip and understanding where he's at, if he feels like he's physically wearing down, or if it's just, the early lumps of a rookie starting pitcher. And that's obviously something we don't have insight into. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different options here.
That always scares me though, because you want the athlete to always be telling the team the absolute truth and being as communicative as possible. But we remember, what was it, 24 Joe Ryan, who tried to pitch through most of the second half of the season with injury and was A, just extremely ineffective and not helping the team at all, but B, was also continuing to put himself out there and increase his risk of injury with every start when he already wasn't feeling 100%. So at some level, I don't know that I would trust a rookie guy who just got his first taste of big league action and is also now struggling to go up to him and be like, hey, buddy, do you think it's maybe time for you to go back down to AAA? Because how does that not kind of sound like a death sentence if you're Connor Prelip?
Okay. Well, I don't think they would walk up and say, "Hey, do you want to get sent to St. Paul, dog?" Like
No,
that's
but that's the
probably
implication here, more or less.
okay. I think we can bet on Derek Shelton be a little bit more tactful, and it's also maybe not, "Hey, you're gonna get optioned to AAA, buddy." It's probably, "Hey, we're gonna put you on the IL. We're gonna give you a couple weeks off. We're managing the load on your arm." That's probably more the path that they would take.
Which I would like to see, but in that case, I also don't know if you even bother asking Prelip. I think you just have to be a smart enough organization to put together the same numbers we just did and say, hey, even if this guy feels great, we really should not be pushing him this hard. We're going to give him the weeks anyways. And this isn't a, hey, do you feel good? It's a, hey, you feel great. We want to make sure you still feel great by the end of the season. Here's what's happening.
Okay, but you can't put him on the IL if he doesn't have an injury. So you have to have that conversation and say, "Hey, how are you feeling? Oh, is your arm a little sore? Are you feeling just like generally fatigued, a little bit worn down? Hey, how do you feel about going on the IL? Like you have to have that conversation, otherwise you open yourself up to a grievance from the MLBPA.
You do, but like, let's be real. It happens all the time. And if there's two very different conversations, one where they come up to Connor Prelip and beat around the bush and pretty much get him to agree to go on the IL, and one where they come up to him and they say, hey, this needs to happen. I think either way, comes out to pretty much the exact same outcome.
Okay. Just from like a liability perspective, the Twins should not be walking up and saying, "You're hurt," and going on the IL. Because
No,
like,
and that would not happen. I
yeah.
understand that these guys are there's a reason these guys are getting paid money, and it's to do this with a lot more grace than what I have just laid out for us on this podcast. But you can't tell me that players don't get suggested to the IL at least a few times a year.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens, but it's definitely in like corroboration slash collaboration with those guys. Like it's
A professional
definitely
manner, for sure.
right. Yeah. Anyways, like I think it's been some early season successes, some injuries in the rotation. I think overall it's been pretty solid. Looking forward to getting guys healthy, seeing this group back at full strength, no longer having to see Mike Paredes on the mound every fifth day. So I've given my rating. Eric, how are you feeling about this rotation?
I've been on the sunny side of this team for the whole episode. I want to stay there. It's really easy to stay there with how they've been playing. Like I said, I give everybody who's thrown the ball out of the starting role for the Twins this season so much respect, because this has been about as poor of a season health wise as we could have ever thought out of the Twins. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna match the offensive grade. I'm gonna give them a B plus. I think because the bullpen has been so bad, some guys have been forced to just go out there and throw the crap out of the ball. Even Zebby Matthews, we haven't talked about him really at all this episode. He hasn't even been particularly like amazing, but even if it hasn't been the most effective baseball of his career, Zebby Matthews has now made 7 starts on the season, and he's gone 6 innings in 3 of them and 7 innings in another 3 of them. At some point, we just need that out of somebody in this rotation. I would like to see better results out of Zebby for sure, but even the guys who haven't been pitching the lights out of the ball have still been finding very legitimately meaningful ways to contribute to the rotation. So I'm happy to stamp a symmetrical B plus on this starting pitching staff. Same grade as I gave the offense. I think you could really nominate either of them as the group MVP of the team, and I would agree with it.
Yeah, I will say going back to Zebby, he's not missed many bats at all. His overall strikeout rate is only at 19% in those 43 innings. However, he is running a pretty good walk rate, well, an excellent walk rate at 5.1%. And as you mentioned, he's averaging over 6 innings per start. I think he's looking like a capable, back end of the rotation starter. It's definitely not what we had hoped for from Zebby when he was a top prospect with the Twins. But as a guy who still has some options left, who can give you some length in the back end, it's definitely at least a helpful player to have. And I think if we continue to see guys like Prelip and maybe Rojas and all the other young options the Twins have get healthy and be productive, and then we backfill some of our prospects, maybe we get guys like Dason Hill and Charlie Soto into the upper minors. I would love to see what Zebby can do in a short relief role, because right now Zebby is really giving me shades of Louis Varland, and I think we could see him make that transition sometime in the next couple years.
Absolutely. And I will say, we I don't know how I feel about calling Zebby Matthews a top pitching prospect out of this organization. He certainly wasn't in the way that a guy like Mick Abel or even Kendry Rojas or Connor Prelip ever was. At the end of the day, we got to remember this is kind of the case of another guy that came out of nowhere, put together a scorching, I'm doing my numbers right, I think it was 2024 again, to kind of arrive at the doorstep of AAA in 2025. He wasn't drafted very highly. He was not ranked very highly as a prospect initially. he certainly earned the right to be considered a top prospect through his performance in the minor leagues. But I think the expectations on Zebby Matthews always should have been tempered a little bit. So for me, I have no complaints with what we've seen so far. I believe that just about wraps up team grades for the first half of this Minnesota Twins season. I think it's really reflective of both the team that we expected to see entering the year and where the team is at now. More positive than negative. So I certainly am happy with where we're at now. Matt, would you say you're happy with the first half of this season?
Yeah, I mean, coming into the year, we talked about just hoping that this team was good enough to keep us interested for the whole year, and they've certainly done that. Yeah, they're right around 500. They're within shouting distance of a playoff spot, and we're on the doorstep of July. And so, from that perspective, it's really hard to be anything but happy with how this Twins season has gone so far.
Absolutely. If we're going to be honest here, I had a little bit of dread at the start of the season thinking about these July, August, September podcasts and how difficult they might be to fill. But as Matt said, they've kept us engaged, they've kept us interested. I was super excited to get out here and talk some more Twins with Matt today. Hopefully, you guys are just as interested in listening as we are in talking about the Twins. If you are, you know where to find us every week. It's on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts. We're also on Twitter, the Matt and Eric Talk Twins podcast. Plus, we are both personally active on Twitter. That's going to be more of your in game, day to day thoughts more than the broader scope we go on this podcast. In the meantime, we will be waiting and watching with the rest of you to see where this Twins team is headed for the second half of the season. Hopefully, if you've been enjoying it so far, then as always, we will see you next week. Thank you for listening.